here to sell you on selling and sales. And it's not something I ever thought I would do, but here we are. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey. In the immortal words of our friend Bruce, fish are friends, not food. And that is something that, as a salesperson, I say to myself when I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror every day. But just a show of hands, I can't really see very well, but how many folks in the audience here have worked in sales or are currently working in sales? Shit, okay, more than I thought. Good, welcome, thank you. Now let me ask a different question. How many of you, thinking back to when you were a kid, how many of you were super keen on like getting a puppy or getting a VR or getting a futurist book that you really had to twist your parents' arm about? How many of you convinced your parents and ended up with the thing in the end? Okay, so virtually most people? Good. Congratulations, you're all salespeople now. That is effectively the crux of selling. So what I sort of found the passion in sales was that realizing or making that connection that sales is actually all around us. And every single interaction you have, when you have a negotiation with your spouse about who's going to do the dishes and who's going to cook, that's a sale. When you're actually buying a thing, that's a sale. But it's all that kind of stuff that's around us and everything that we do. So I guess to give you a bit of insight and to lead with vulnerability, as I like to do, and you'll learn why later in the talk, but I wanted to take you on a bit on my journey. So fun fact, accent. Yep, may have picked it. Surprise, I'm from the US originally. But I've lived here for about 15 years now. And I finished my last 2 years of high school here, didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I came back to Australia and I dabbled with uni is probably a generous term. I dabbled drunkenly for 6 years, not really knowing what I wanted to do. But I did it because I thought that was what was expected of me. My dad is a French professor. He's a French professor, academic. And I was going to make a joke about that, and then I realized there's probably a lot of academics in this room, so maybe I shouldn't. But there's probably not many of my dads in this room, so that's fine. But he always had this very different view of what my life should be. And so it was like, go to uni and get a PhD and do all the things and then be an academic like me, even though I'm miserable. And I wasn't really into that. Wasn't feeling that vibe. And I couldn't figure out what I wanted. But my uncle was a salesman who's always like one of the best salesmen I knew. And as a kid, I was always told like, oh, this kid could sell ice to Eskimos. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I like the cold. And so I decided, you know what, I did what any uni kid did, and I got a part-time gig working in retail, and I was selling, as Mark said, MP3 players, predominantly Apple products. And I thought, you know what, I'm actually really enjoying this, and maybe sales doesn't have to be gross and icky and weird. And so I decided to take a punt, and I was super passionate about tech. I'm a nerd, surprise. And I love cars, and I saw Tesla was opening a store here, and I thought, you know what? Let's see where this goes. Let's follow this. And so I spent 3 years at Tesla. My first year, I was like one of 20 employees, and I worked in sales. As Mark said, I sold many a Tesla. I drive my wife nuts because I have a stupid memory for the VIN numbers and license plates of cars that I've sold. So never come driving around Melbourne with me because I go, oh, I sold that one. That's this family. They have this dog. Can't remember birthdays. Anyways. After about 2 years of doing that, I became the manager there. I grew the team and had a very different perspective. But as all good / terrible things must do, came to an end, mainly because of burnout. I was very proud that I found that photo because it was very similar to what I did. Crawled out of there. And so I sort of took pause and went, you know what, the passion that I had for selling is gone. What happened? So I took some time. And then I worked in an absolute train wreck of a solar tech startup. And I'm sorry, Bridget, but I totally would have sold you a battery because you're absolutely right, you do need one. Fuck what other people say, you need one. And then that was actually a powerful experience because it taught me and reminded me again, helped me fall in love with sales again. And what I've realized is that it's not about what you sell, but it's about how you feel about what you're selling. So for me, I can't sell you shit if I don't care about it and if I don't ultimately believe in it and I don't feel that it's ultimately benefiting you. So strong ethical links. A big part of why I hated sales was because that guy right there, or everything that he represents. So if you're familiar with Wolf of Wall Street or any iterations of those people or films, they're all garbage humans. But they came to rise out of sort of the Reaganomics of the 80s, right? So uncapped markets and deregulation left, right, and center. And this idea that profits were king. So it didn't matter what you were selling, it didn't matter what kind of position you were putting people in. All that mattered was the paychecks and the dollars and cents that you got at the end of the day. And so ultimately that was kind of, this idea of like when I was looking at sales and my uncle, who's kind of an old school sales guy, gave me all these books when I started selling. And you look at them and they're very like old school machismo techniques, right? It's like close, gotta close people, always be closing. You're like, what the fuck does that mean? Or body language, right? One of my favorite ones was the example of like, no, you make them sit in that chair, but you make them think it's your idea. It's like, what the fuck what is this? So all of this kind of old school stuff, it's all about power and power imbalances, which again, made me feel kind of icky because it's almost like you're taking advantage of people. And so when you looking at that versus, for example, modern day selling, which is what I like to think I do now, it's shifted away because now sort of us as the consumers, but also employees have gotten on to the fact that, okay, well, my employer has these massive expectations of me, but the consumer has gotten wise to our selling crap. What do? Well, the company's still going to say, bring me money, bring me money. Well, I can't do it. So there has to be some sort of a shift. Luckily, the shift was towards science and psychology and emotional selling. And how these things are, again, going back to basics and going back to connecting with human beings on a really human, natural level. Now, I'm glad there's some chuckles because I was really nervous about this slide. I asked a bunch of my friends who are in this room and none of them knew where this came from. And I was like, thank you. What? Agreed. I was like, this PowerPoint is going to go down like a lead balloon. That's fine. It's fine. We'll deal with it when we get there. But the way that I like to think about sales is really about basic alchemy, right? It's just very simple. The bit of the sugar, the spice, the everything nice. So this shift away from power dynamics and power imbalances and, the BS of neurolinguistic programming and all that kind of stuff, and kind of focusing on active listening, which sounds like a really dumb buzzword, but is just being present in a conversation and listening to what your partner, your customer, your client, your friends are trying to tell you. Thinking about mirroring, so instead of the body language and how to make yourself take up more space or be aggressive, thinking about how you can make your client feel more comfortable in that space, right? If they're more soft-spoken, don't be overbearing and yell in their face. If they're yelling in their face, yell back at them. Very simple things of how you can relate to them on a human level. And so again, kind of continuing that thought and taking a step back, placing the focus on increasing diversity in hiring as well. Woman in tech, woman in car sales, I'm a unicorn, hooray. I tried really hard at Tesla to try and attract more of that diversity of talent as well. But all of that is, again, a fundamental thing of that when we go to buy someone, when we're trying to place trust in someone else, we want to see parts of ourselves reflected in the person that we're talking to. You can't have that if it's a bunch of straight old white dudes. So, speaking of straight older white dudes, gone are the days of the Matthew McConaughey, all right. And now we're moving more towards, again, with this influx of that pop psychology, if you will, but again, going back to basics, there's kind of like a new ethical dilemma, which is, are we still using those powers of influence, and how do we use them in an ethical way? So if I'm, mirroring with a client in an interaction, and they end up buying what I'm selling, is that okay? Are there any moral or ethical implications there, and where is that line? And my thinking is, I'm not a scientist, surprise, but I am a people geek. It's one I prepared earlier. And I'd be surprised. It was something I never really realized. I work at a place called Culturamp now, and it's an amazing, amazing place, which brings in all these things. We've got leaders, and we truly, I sound like I've drunk the Kool-Aid and like the Mormons that I talked about in my description, but truly talks the talk and walks the walk. So what we do is all about that empathetic selling and helping improve the culture and the ways of working within organizations. And so that kind of shift, I jumped into this role and they were like, yeah, you're a people geek. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? And then I thought about it and I was like, no, hang on, this resonates with me and I can't figure out why. But ultimately, I think part of the reason why I've been so successful in sales is that ever since I was a kid, for me, people are like giant Rubik's Cubes on legs. Perhaps that's the burb future. I don't know. Maybe we'll see that soon. But, everybody has a different solution and a number of different possible potential solutions, like our futures, weaving that in on a journey. And so for me, the fascination and the joy that I got out of those human interactions was trying to figure out what made them tick, what were their motivations, what were their passions, what was the rationale behind what they were doing. And that is effectively what a people geek is. And this is this kind of new ilk of sales folks that are coming up, I would say, sort of in this newer generation, because the psychology of selling is constantly evolving, because we've kind of kept that bullshit 80s approach to the curb and gone, none of that, Wolf of Wall Street, see you later, and actually thought about how we relate to people and how we can improve lives. And so for me, the interesting piece is that the psychology is evolving at the same rate that we as the consumer is changing. So if you think that, the stuff of the 80s was really popular because that's sort of the boomer generation and Gen X. Now, Gen Y, Gen Z, Zillennials, if there are any in the room, sorry for my skinny jeans, but you'll take them off my dead legs. But if you think about like how sales and how consumerism has changed in the last sort of 20, 30 years and what a lot of the conservative liberal boomers are saying of like, oh, well, millennials have killed the diamond trade and don't even get me started on fabric softener. And it's like, well, yeah, because we understand what's important to us, but also what's important to our community and what we want to actually invest in and use that purchasing buying power that is so important. So the kind of culmination of these things and the fascinating pace is that whilst my job is to sell, all of our collective jobs is to influence the way that I sell to you and that we buy. And we have a huge amount of power in that as well. The other thing as well is that the companies will always need a consumer, right? So don't forget that when you think about where you're buying from and who you're buying from. If you get that feeling of like, oh, that was a weird, I don't know, I talked to a salesperson and they just didn't vibe, don't buy from them. That's the easiest way they'll learn. I guarantee you if they're working on commission, they ain't gonna do that again. Give them feedback, another great way. But ultimately, sales for me, the joy that I get out of sales is also a bit about that chase. So bringing it back to this idea of the empathetic shark, when I was at Tesla, it was something I really wanted to ingrain in my team of like, we're all in sales for a reason because we're passionate and we get excited about closing that deal and the next thing and how we get there. But when that sharkiness overtakes your human empathy and your ability to connect with a customer, we've done something wrong and we've crossed a line. And so it's probably been talked about before, but I'm going to tell myself I came up with this phrase of being an empathetic shark. And so it's this idea that for every fiber of sharkiness that I have in my being, I also have to have an equal amount of empathetic fibers. And if we come at it from that place, like I'm always going to chase that blood in the water. This is taking a turn. Where am I going with this analogy? But I'm also going to apply first aid. I don't know where I'm going with this. But ultimately, I guess the main thing is that if we boil it down to Sales 101, it's just connecting with other people. And so follow your empathetic passions. And with that, I will wrap up my chat for the evening like a good 21st speech. Short and sweet.
Go to nerdnite.com to find a Nerd Night event near you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for our latest presentation.